Hi friends and new friends. You know, here at Cash Alternative TV, we're big fans of cryptocurrency, and I'm sure if you're watching this, you probably are as well. But although we're cheerleaders, you have to step back and take a look and give it some analytical thought from time to time. It's been around for 10 years, and it's yet to make any significant inroads into the legacy system. Why is that? Well, that's the big question, and there's lots of analytical thinkers out there who ponder that question every day. Among them is my guest for today, and we'll see him on this episode of CATV. I'm Christopher Carruthers, also known as Tao of Satoshi, and you're watching Cash Alternative TV. So what is Cash Alternative TV other than that catchy jingle? Well, it's a show about cryptocurrency with a focus on Dash, which aims to be a digital cash for the world, an alternative to cash. If that's something that you're interested in, you want to learn more about Dash, or just want to hang out with me some more, don't forget to subscribe and click the bell so you don't miss an episode. Now onto the topic of today's show. Today's guest is Bradley Zastrow. He has a unique perspective on the relationship between fiat currency systems and digital currency systems. He's held high positions in both American Express and the Dash core group. He recently posted 2 articles on Medium that dealt with digital currency issues. The first one was called Hammer in Search of a Nail, and that was dealing with the 3 pillars of cryptocurrency adoption and what that cryptocurrency is doing right and what it could be doing better. And the second article was called Moving Along the S-Curve of Adoption, which dealt with what cryptocurrency enthusiasts need to do to get more people involved in cryptocurrency and move along that S-curve towards the end of the adoption curve. Both of the articles were quite well written, and you can read them after you finish watching this video. I'll leave the links in the description below. But for now though, let's talk about the cryptocurrency challenges and how we can overcome them today with Bradley Zastrow. Welcome to the show, Bradley.
Thank you very much. It's great to be here.
Yeah, so you've been this is a second time for you on Cash Alternative TV. It's always a pleasure talking with you. You once worked for Dash Core Group, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, I think first time we chatted, about 2 years ago. So crazy how quickly time flies, and yeah, how different of a world it is now.
So before we begin, why don't you give yourself a quick introduction and let us know how it is you got into cryptocurrency?
Yeah, so full name's Bradley Zastrow. I think for many people might know me the most. I was the global head of biz dev for Dash, or Dash Core Group, sorry. I know some people will pick up on that, so that was just a slight error on my side. Didn't mean anything by it. But yeah, I joined Dash Core Group, I guess it was December of 2017. And then I left, I think it was around maybe March, end of February, early March of 2019. Unfortunately, crypto winter kind of hit every project really quite hard, but no hard feelings, definitely understand. But yeah, just absolutely, love crypto. First probably got into that. I'd say, I wasn't one of the early adopters. I know there's been people who've been in it much, much longer than myself, but it was probably in that kind of, early 2017 where I really started getting more interested in it than just, I guess, simply observing, and actually start participating a little bit more. So that's how I guess started down the rabbit hole, as they say, and yeah, where I'm at today.
Okay, the reason why I called you on the show today is because I wanted to talk about your unique perspective that you have on the industry, where you've been involved in high positions in Dash, and you've also been involved in high positions in Legacy with American Express. So you have quite an interesting viewpoint, and I wanted to bring that to my viewers today. So let's talk about the 2 articles that you just brought out. One of them was called Moving Along the S-Curve of Adoption, I think. And
Yep.
The other one was A Hammer in Search of a Nail. So I want to talk about the hammer in search of a nail first. This entails 3 pillars of adoption for cryptocurrency, and what you think that cryptos are doing well and what you think they can improve on. So what were those 3 pillars that you said in the article there, Bradley?
Yeah, well, it was, and it's something that, I've kind of mentioned quite a few times kind of in the past as well. But, I guess the way I looked at specifically as it related to maybe more around the payments solution that crypto can provide, really around, I guess, making it easy to acquire, easy to store, and easy to spend. And my belief is that if those 3 pillars are I guess done really well and provide a differentiated value prop to the users, that's really how I guess you could say, that adoption can get accelerated. I think there's still opportunity, in those spaces. But again, the easier you can make that, the cheaper you can make that, I think is where the best chances for success really lie.
Okay, so among those three of the acquire and store and spending, where do you think that cryptocurrency is doing the best job at this point?
Ooh, that's actually a good question. Arguably, I'd say, well, I guess it depends on what measure of success. As far as acquiring, one could say, as far as, right now in 2020, it's a lot easier than even 2017 as far as buying crypto. There's a lot more brokers, there's quite a few more exchanges, and I guess it's open to a lot more people in different jurisdictions. I know when I first started in 2017, there were Australia, where I'm currently based, was a lot, I guess, didn't have as many options as, say, compared to the United States, for example, and that's now obviously changed. So it's certainly gotten easier. I would still say, on the acquire side, it's still kind of expensive, depending on where you're going, depending on what you're using. You're either going to trade off, if you look at the US, if you do an ACH transfer, that'll be the cheapest, but it'll be arguably the slowest. The contra to that is using the credit card. Going to be a little bit quicker, but obviously it's going to be a little bit more expensive too. So, I do think there are different companies that are doing quite well. I think I'm a big fan of Uphold, obviously a strong partner with Dash as well. And that gets me, I think, to, I guess going back to your question of the three pillars, store, I think is probably where the value prop's the strongest. And I guess, to highlight Uphold, they've done extremely well, on that side and building out a larger value prop, because it's not just a wallet anymore. They're building in additional services, obviously making it easy to acquire on their side now with their launch. I know not yet in Canada, but, in the US, launch of, their crypto debit card, making it easier to spend as well. So they're maybe, I guess, a good example of hitting all three of those pillars, rather than one individual one. But, at the same time, I do think the store is probably where it's a little bit strongest. Spending is probably where it's been a little bit more of a challenge, both probably in the breadth of areas that one could spend, but then also, I guess, just the value prop itself. If you've got store XYZ, they accept a Visa card and they accept, say, any particular crypto. Is there necessarily a value prop that's going to get that new user to go out, acquire the crypto to then spend at that store? And I think that's where the current challenge is right now. It's quite frankly, for a user, it's easier to use, say a Visa debit, American Express, MasterCard, etc.
Okay, so let's go over each of those ones. This is kind of an interesting topic because a lot of times as crypto people, we don't really think about the negatives. We're always thinking about the positives, bull market, we want to pump it up and everything else. But there really is lots of challenges for cryptocurrency, and it's something that the legacy system has worked on for years, and they have a huge leg up on us. So let's go over the acquire. So like how is the legacy system doing acquiring, right? Where cryptocurrency should be catching up to them?
Yeah, I mean, and you bring up a good point. I guess the first I'd say is there's nothing wrong with pointing out the negatives. I mean, I think that's how you and negative even might be too strong of a word. That's how you get better, right? You've got to understand where those opportunities are and how to fix them or how to improve upon them. So it's definitely not I guess any sort of bearish view, on crypto, but rather, how do we just make it better? Going back to your point, on the acquire side, and again, I think that there's a few companies doing it. How do you make that easier? One of the, I think, easiest ways is around now. You see it with a lot of different companies, but crypto back. We did it with Dash back in, I think it was 2018 with rewards. But, now you see everything from Lolly, which, I'm a big fan of, as far as you're using legacy payment, I guess, using a legacy payment process, again, Visa, MasterCard, or American Express, but you're earning your cash back as Bitcoin. Very easy way, very low friction way to get people who otherwise might not be interested in crypto to now acquiring it. And of course, once they acquire it, that's when it leads down to, I guess, the rabbit hole that we all kind of get into once we first kind of start owning a little bit of crypto. You start seeing that, for example, with a lot of the WireX cards. You see that with Uphold as well, all doing a crypto back. So I think that's, I guess, as far as one way to make things easier. I think that makes things very easy. And again, it touches on the other points, I talked about around, cost and speed to acquire crypto. This is your everyday, purchases, your everyday usage, and you're earning crypto. So I think that's a great, approach. The other is, almost, and acquiring is probably maybe a little bit of a play on words, but, in some ways it's, how do you use crypto as strictly as a payment rail? So in the sense of, the analogy would be Visa is a payment network that's used to transfer the value of, in this case, say it's a US dollar or whatever fiat. How do you use say the Dash network, to do that that value transfer, but where the user doesn't necessarily, quote, know that they're using, cryptocurrency. And so I guess, in a very hypothetical, very high level sense, it would be something where someone's making that purchase denominated in whatever US dollars, Canadian dollars, euros, etc. That's converted to crypto on the back side. That's then transferred to the merchant, the recipient, whomever, and then it's converted immediately to fiat, on the, on that receiving side as well. Both the purchaser and the receiver kind of don't necessarily need to know that they're using crypto. Again, they're buying and they're receiving fiat, but the actual network being used, of course, is a cryptocurrency network. And again, you've got all the benefits around, no chargebacks. You've got the speed, the cost, et cetera. That would hopefully be part of that value prop. That's another way that I could see acquiring, being, I guess, improved upon.
Okay. So before we move on to storing, I have a little aside question. So far you've mentioned like your previous employer, American Express, Uphold, Wirex. These are all centralized companies. Do you think that centralized companies have a leg up on decentralized currencies such as Dash when it comes to these things?
Yeah, it's a good question. I guess I look at it almost, and maybe it's not the most perfect analogy, but, kind of even just generally speaking with software, you got you've got open source and closed source software. I think both play a particular role. I think to sit there and say one's necessarily better than the other kind of depends on the, I guess, the score sheet you're using. I do think one advantage that a centralized company can provide is often quicker. They can be a little bit quicker sometimes, not always, but they can also, be a little bit more focused as well. And they aren't necessarily going to be pulled in a million different directions based on, different interests and whims, et cetera. Flip side is, of course, decentralized. I mean, there's a lot of, clear benefits with a decentralized organization as well. It's obviously it's censorship resistant, if not censorship proof. As being probably one of the key elements, and I think, if you look at, for example, what, any sort of DAO or specifically the Dash DAO has done, has done some great advancements, as it relates to, particularly, the diff that was, just now actually started to make some of its initial investments, so yeah, I think there's pros and cons to both. It just kind of depends a little bit on the score sheet, as it were.
Yeah, so Dash is trying to come up with a system that kind of melds the centralized with the decentralized, because some things obviously work better centralized and some things work better decentralized. It's kind of like a hybrid right now, because whereas we're trading off a little bit on the decentralization because we've got the master nodes with the high stakes, but it's still decentralized because nobody knows each other. These master nodes don't know each other. They're from all over the world, and they're coming up with decisions on the direction of Dash. So if you're new to the channel, Bradley and I both have relations with Dash, the Dash network. And this is definitely something that you should look into if you're interested in that fabric of decentralized versus centralized. So let's move on to storage. I guess your best bets are like a Treasure or a Ledger or something like that. But I guess this is hard for people because there's no 1-800 number you can call if you lose your Dash or you lose your Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash or anything like that. It's like, Karen, can I speak to the manager of Bitcoin? You can't really do that, right? So like, how are we going to overcome that? Like, how are we going to teach people to become their own bank?
Yeah, I mean, I think, that's all. I guess in short, that's the $1 million question in many ways. Because I think there's definitely going to be a group of the population that the concept of losing your password and you lose your money forever is not an appealing one, and I don't think we can necessarily blame them, for that as well. That is a risk that, particularly if you look at, I mean, people aren't great with passwords. Let's look at the facts. But I think that there are ways that different projects and different people are kind of approaching that, which I think makes sense. I think first and foremost, and again, I'm obviously most familiar with the Dash network. Evolution, and the fact of moving to say usernames, not just obviously Dash, but I guess overall the concept of using actual usernames or having a different user ID rather than a wallet address. Maybe that's a little bit more on the spend side of things as opposed to maybe the storage, but I do think that overall makes things a lot easier. The cryptographic address doesn't necessarily need to be part of that user experience. I think I've seen some other things as far as some projects around, and I'm drawing a blank right now off the top of my head, but where they're trying to move beyond, I guess, just the private keys, and finding a way, using basically different trusted sources, that say someone can actually reclaim, I guess, a private seed phrase that maybe they would have lost beforehand. Now, that does have probably, or not probably, it would have certain, trade-offs, and I think the probably the purist, would look at that as maybe a negative because, again, that is introducing a small element of risk. But, I think that's where, again, it goes back to what does the user want and what does that user need? That's where I think you do see a lot more custodial type of solutions as well, that are out there, everything from the institutional like BitGo to probably more, almost, if you will, a crypto bank, for individual users, and I think what we'll see is, I guess, overall a good mix. You'll have that kind of crypto bank equivalent that, again, it's not going to necessarily satisfy the purist. It's not going to satisfy that person that wants to be their own bank. And that's fine because there are going to be those people that'll want that as a solution.
Right. So yeah, you're right. You bring up a good point. Like some people are going to want to trust the centralized institution, especially if government comes in and regulates them. So something like the FDIC. You have the investment or kind of insurance on that, right? Mm-hmm. So that's cool. But then you got the people that are the purists and the guys who have been here forever. They're going to want to have it on their hard drive or their ledger or their Trezor or whatever. Exactly. So yeah, I mean it's different strokes for different folks. So I think we will definitely overcome that in time. Maybe with the trade-off that some of these people don't want centralization, but it's going to happen, right?
And that's the thing, as I think it's one of those where there's people are just different, right? Let alone when you look at that on a global level. And so I think that's what we're going to find is that there are going to be different solutions that are going to work for different groups of people. And one solution might not necessarily work for a different group. And I think that's where we need to be. And I need to be okay with that, and I think that's where we'll see probably a lot greater adoption is when that becomes a little bit more flexible.
All right. So this has been Bradley Zastrow, as I've been talking about the challenges facing cryptocurrency, and we're going to move on to spending. So what's crypto doing well in spending, and where do we need to improve?
I think, as far as the last couple of years, I mean, where crypto's done well is the variety of places to spend. Crypto has definitely obviously increased in the last couple of years. I think for me, at least, it still feels that it's more of an off-ramp for those that are already into crypto, as opposed to shall we say, a means or a reason for people to get into it. So I think, what I kind of mentioned in my article was that, the focus on the merchant, I think is, yes, you can't forget about them, but this focus on the merchant of, yes, well, we're cheaper than, Visa or MasterCard. Well, yes, you are. I mean, crypto is in general. I mean, maybe not necessarily every crypto, but, at the end of the day, by and large, crypto is a lot quicker and a lot cheaper, than, say, Visa card. But if cost was the only reason for a merchant to make a decision on a form of payment, we wouldn't see the explosive growth that we have, for example, in a lot of the buy now, pay it later, schemes that Klarna came out with, that Zipco has, so on and so forth. And I guess ultimately at the end of the day, those range anywhere from 3 to 6%. So these merchants are actually paying a premium compared to, say, Visa or MasterCard or American Express. And the reason for that is because they're bringing in new customers, they're spending more, it's the right demographic, ... So the focus on, well, it's cheaper, 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 I think kind of misses a little bit of the point of what maybe merchants actually want. And so I think, we need to understand, what those merchants want. Now, in certain industries, crypto, I think, has a great use case. I think, and, we've seen this, for example, in online gambling. The lack of a chargeback, or industries that, typically are called sin industries, but where there's maybe difficulty in getting, say, credit card acceptance. Again, different use case, but I think that's, definitely where crypto has a role to play. My view, I guess, is, how do we focus on the user? Ultimately, at the end of the day, if we can bring more people into crypto and get more people excited and wanting to spend crypto, and not just those that are already into crypto, I mean, I'm talking about net new users, that's going to, right off the bat be an incentive that can't even speak, an incentive for merchants, again, going back to the buy now, pay it later schemes. So, again, how do we do that? It's going to depend on different users, different jurisdictions, so on and so forth. But I think, again, building that out, maybe it is, with a crypto debit card that provides certain different cash back, that provides, if you look at, for example, American Express, there's a range of benefits that one gets as a card member beyond just the ability to spend his or her money. We haven't really seen that yet as far as that next step in the evolution of, say, call it crypto credit or crypto debit cards. I think as that kind of value prop starts to build out, what you'll find is people actually wanting to take out that card because it provides benefits beyond just simply the ability to spend crypto. At least that's my view as far as how to bring some of those users in.
Okay, so just out of curiosity, what are those buy now, pay later things, like whatever that you're mentioning? Could it be adopted for a digital currency like Dash, or no?
I mean, in theory, it could. I guess the short summary is for those that are familiar with, say, laybys or layaway, it's the exact same concept, except that at the end of the day, one, the user gets the product right away, so it's not after it's paid off, and two, the fee itself, rather, it's zero interest to the user. And the fees are being paid by the merchants. So in this case, it can range up to, I think, to be fair, it can range up to 10%, but it's, it averages in that kind of 3 to 6% range. So again, I don't know, there's a widget you want to buy, it's $1,000, and instead of, again, having to save up for it, you get it right away, and maybe it's 4 easy installments of $250, per month. That fee, of course, then is paid by that merchant, and everybody's happy. All
right. So that pretty much covers your first article that I wanted to talk about, the hammer about search of a nail. So that's pretty well done. I admire the fact that you've had experience with both our areas, because I haven't had too much experience with the legacy side, lots with the crypto side, but not with the legacy side. But let's talk a little bit about your second article, which was the moving along the S-curve of adoption. So we're cryptocurrency. Where do we sit on this S-curve right now?
It's hard to say. I think, again, that's kind of the $1 million question. I think where we're at is in that stage where people are still testing it out, and where it's in that individual stage of, people are doing their own cost benefit analysis as far as, adoption goes. You definitely, early adopters are clearly sold on the concept. But I think, again, in the analogy that, you hear a lot of people say, well, is grandma using it, so to speak. Will grandma ever use it? Who knows? But, I think at the end of the day, the mainstream, adoption of cryptocurrency, I think, still remains to be seen. Now we're focusing a lot, obviously, on the payment side. And of course, crypto's got a lot. I mean, it's got a lot of use case beyond just, say, payments. You got everything from identity, Internet of Things, you got micro payments, I guess, is maybe one area that we haven't really talked about. But I guess overall, at the end of the day, I do think it probably depends, on that individual use case. But going back to payments itself, I still think we're kind of earlier days, kind of as I was mentioning before. I think, using crypto as a form of payment, is still in more that kind of early adopter stage. It's not really kind of mainstream. And I think a lot of what you find people that are using it are people that already have crypto. It's not people that are deciding, I need to go buy crypto because now I want to use it as a form of payment to spend. They're using their Visa, MasterCard, cash, whatever the case may be. How do we move beyond that? I think that's where the communication comes into play, and I think, that's easier to say and harder to do, especially because different groups of people, different demographics are going to respond to that communication differently. But I think where my personal view is that the crypto industry itself can't necessarily bet on converting everyone that's mainstream to the viewpoints necessarily of crypto. I know that's been a lot of focus, and look, there's certainly going to have its success stories. It's not going to be, I guess, a complete failure, but I think what that does is it slows things down and it lowers the potential scope. How do we basically find that common ground? How do we speak the same language of those potential customers? I think that's kind of where I would flip the coin to the other side and focus more on that messaging rather than trying to bring everybody into the crypto philosophy, if you will.
Okay, I saw a little while ago this TED Talk with Simon Sinek, and this is all about the S-curve of adoption. And what he was saying is that a lot of companies know what they do, a lot of companies know how they do it, but not very many companies know why they do it, and not many companies are good at communicating why they do it. Yeah. So this is something that they say moves you along the S-curve of adoption, because the more people you can captivate with your message of why you do it, the more people are going to respond to you. They say it's something on a biological subconscious level. So have you seen that TED Talk, and what do you have to say about it if you have?
No, I haven't actually seen the TED Talk, but I mean, I think it makes perfect sense. The S curve was really kind of created. Everett Rogers, who's been a big influence on me, he wrote a book, The Fusion of Innovations, and one of the examples he talked about, was, in this case, it was a very remote village in Peru, and the technology that they were trying to, I guess, adopt, or rather push for adoption within this village, was the concept of boiling water as a means to, I guess, improve overall hygiene, health, etc. Without getting into all the detail, the bottom line was that was a paradigm shift that those individuals did not fully understand because of their own, I guess, kind of culture, and they used the wrong messaging to get people to adopt it. And as a result, it didn't get adopted, and it was a big failure. So, I think, again, that why you're doing it, it's not only just the why, but it ends up being, because you can preach from the mountaintops, this is why we're doing it, but that message may not necessarily resonate with, again, those customers that you want to bring on board. So I think, again, it's going out and saying, well, why do these customers, have issues or have concerns, or what are these customers' problems? I think that's what, we did very well at Dash Core Group, focusing on 5 particular pillars, rather than, say, just trying to be, a shotgun approach and kind of hit everything. We said, well, look, here's 5 key pillars that, as far as DCG, that at the time we were going to focus on. And again, to try to get, I guess, that message across.
All right. So say you're the CEO of crypto. I'm going to put you as the CEO of crypto right now. How do you proceed from here to capture people's imagination? Like to say, what, crypto is the way forward. Crypto is the thing that we need to get behind because this is the future. But what steps would you take?
That's a good question. I mean, I guess it depends on the use case itself. I think, again, if we're focusing strictly on say, kind of the payment side, I think it's one of those where it's a very simplistic answer, but I think that there's still a lot of truth to it. It's just, how do we make it easier? And I think overall, messages around, the Fed and inflation and so on and so forth might resonate to a certain demographic, but that's not going to be the message that's going to, I don't believe, get mainstream adoption, regardless of how true or untrue or what one thinks about it. I think the reality is not everybody cares. and or at least doesn't care enough to say, well, I'm going to become unbanked. And maybe that's not the right answer that people want to hear. But, I think, again, if you talk about the average, Joe or Jane on the street, they're worried about how to pay the bills. They're worried what's for dinner that night, or so on and so forth. They're not worried about some of these other, I guess, elements. So how do we just make it easier? How do we put it through into the background? Like we said, using crypto as a payment rail is something that's, very interesting to me, again, on the payment side, or, the micro payment side as well. I think, there's a lot of, I guess, advantages that micro payments, or rather that crypto can provide on the micro payment side as well. But, I guess, how do we get that larger adoption? Yeah, I think, again, it just, how do we make it easier? Right now, there's a lot of focus on the investment side. To be honest, again, right, wrong, or indifferent, I think, though, one of the outcomes by focusing on the investment side of crypto is people don't necessarily want to spend it. At the end of the day, if, say, Robinhood allowed you to sell fractional shares of Apple stock to go buy your coffee, are you necessarily going to do that? There might be some people that would, but again, the vast majority of people that would be buying the Apple stock or whatever are not necessarily going to be buying Apple or Amazon or whatever stock as a means to then go spend it at, say, a coffee store or a coffee shop, rather. Same sort of thing with crypto. And I think if that message is around the investment, okay, that's great. But that, to me at least, doesn't necessarily automatically flow through into the payment side. So maybe it's more of just being more specific around, the different use cases of crypto and focusing only on a couple rather than trying to, again, be too broad, might help make that message a little bit sharper.
All right. So what do you think the impact is going to be of centralized cryptocurrencies such as Libra? They're coming out. There's some people are saying they're having a pre-sale right now, but this is like Facebook cryptocurrency. Do you think this is going to have a negative impact or a positive impact?
Net, I think it's going to be a positive impact. And I think it's going to be that for a couple of reasons. One, it's going to, let's face it, the amount of instant users, theoretically, if Facebook or if Libra was integrated, for example, into WhatsApp, we just know Facebook Pay just did that with Brazil. That's 120 million users just in the country of Brazil. The potential scale of adoption could explode. So right, wrong, or indifferent, I do see that as being, one element of net positive. The other is that we know right now that there's a lot of uncertainty around regulations, and different countries are different. For example, Australia, if you buy crypto with the intent to spend it, there is no capital gains event. I'm not a tax expert, and all that disclaimer, but joking aside, the analogy that the tax office here uses is if you go overseas and buy euro because you have a holiday in Europe, and you come back with leftover euros that you sell back to the bank, yeah, it might be, you might make a little bit or you might lose a little bit, but either way, it's not a capital gain or capital loss event. Versus the US, where every time you spend crypto, it's a capital gains event. That's a challenge, to get people in a paradigm to I guess, get people around to, I now have to track every transaction I do, to declare on my taxes. That's a giant pain. So I think, again, those larger centralized projects like that will help with, I guess, getting regulators on board, helping explain, maybe to some of the regulators, around, just kind of how to do it smarter. At least that's my hope. Maybe that's too glass half full. I'm sure that, and there are, other risks, along with it as well. But to me, at least, I think net, if you stack it up, it'll be a positive for the industry.
Yeah, I guess that question was more circling back to your first article. That would kind of be more into the spend category, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
the challenges around spending. So are there any cryptocurrencies that you're interested in now? I know you previously were in Dash Core Group, but I'm sure you're interested in other cryptocurrencies too. Is there any that you're particularly interested in right now?
I guess without, there are, I guess, look, overall, I like Bitcoin. I like Ethereum. I like Stellar. I like Dash. I think they all have, slightly different use cases, slightly different angles that they play. I don't really subscribe to the maximalism theories that some of the others do. And look, that teach their own. I'm not going to criticize those that do. But, at the end of the day, to me, it's all interesting in different ways, and again, they are all trying to do slightly different things with slightly different angles. So I guess, yeah, there's no one in particular. Of course, I'll always have, part of my heart with Dash, because obviously that's where I started. But, again, I think there are quite a few different projects that are doing interesting things. I do like what Ethereum's doing. I think the DeFi and the stablecoin, kind of ecosystem is incredibly interesting, and has, potential for some great value there as well. So, I think there's a big enough space, I guess, ultimately, where there's not only going to be one winner. It's going to be different, different coins, different projects that are going to excel in different areas. And I think that's kind of what's exciting, is there is room for more than, I guess, one project to play in.
Absolutely. Like, since the last time you were on the show, I've kind of branched out a little bit. I'm not just doing Dash stuff. I'm now branding myself as a cryptocurrency channel with a focus on Dash. So like I can look at different cryptocurrencies and what they're doing and learn from everybody and have respect for everybody, basically. Yeah. And also teach others about Dash, because I still have my heart belongs with Dash, but my brain belongs with Dash, because I can see what they're doing and I can see that they have as good a chance as any of being a payment currency of the future.
No, definitely.
So yeah, I'm happy to have you on the show. This has been Bradley Zastrow. He was formerly business development manager of Dash Core Group. And he had a high-ranking position in American Express, so he has the angle on both sides. Is there any other anecdotes you might want to share with us before we wrap things up?
No, I think we probably covered quite a bit. So no, I really appreciate it again, Nate. Like I said, I just can't believe it's been 2 years and how quickly that's been. So no, thank you again for the invite.
No problem. We'll have you on another time. All the best for you.
Hey, thank you very much. I appreciate it. Cheers.
Cheers. Bye for now. Well, that was my interview with Bradley Zastrow. I hope you found some of his insights informative. And we'll gladly have him on the show as cryptocurrency adoption improves. I'm Christopher Carruthers, also known as Tao Satoshi, and that's it for me today. Hope you liked this video. Subscribe and click the bell if you want to see more from me in Cash Alternative TV episodes. Until next time, remember, Dash is a better money for a better future, and that future is getting closer every day. Bye for now.